wouldn't believe me if I told you," Emily Walker whispered, her voice unsteady. "But that dog saved my little girl. He stopped her from being taken right in front of our house." The words caught in her throat as she recounted the terrifying moment to the police. She stood in the middle of her driveway, her arms wrapped tightly around her 3-year-old daughter, Sophie. The child clung to her, wide-eyed and trembling, the echoes of her terrified cries still lingering in the air. Only minutes ago, Emily's worst nightmare had nearly come true. She had been watering the plants on her porch, basking in the warmth of the late afternoon sun, while Sophie played just a few feet away, happily bouncing her stuffed rabbit along the pavement. It had been an ordinary day, the neighborhood quiet, the trees casting long shadows across the street. And then everything changed. The man had appeared out of nowhere, moving fast, silent. Dressed casually, with a baseball cap pulled low over his face, he blended into the suburban stillness until he struck. One moment Sophie was giggling. The next she was in the grip of a stranger. Emily barely had time to process what was happening when a blur of fur and snapping teeth launched into action. The dog, thin, scruffy, clearly a stray, lunged at the man's legs with terrifying force. A deep, guttural snarl ripped through the air as sharp teeth sank into the attacker's arm. The man yelped in pain, his grip on Sophie faltering. He let go, stumbling back as the stray wedged himself between them, his body rigid, his dark eyes blazing with an almost unnatural intensity. Emily reacted on instinct, snatching Sophie into her arms, her pulse hammering. The man hesitated for only a second, 1 second too long. He took one last look at the snarling animal, and the mother clutches her child before bolting, vanishing behind a row of parked cars. The dog didn't chase him. Instead, he turned, his gaze locking onto Emily. There was something knowing in his eyes, something deliberate. It was as if he had been waiting for this moment. Then, just as silently as he had appeared, he turned and trotted away, his tail flicking behind him. Within minutes, the wail of sirens shattered the uneasy silence. Emily's neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, had seen everything from her window and called 911. Officers canvassed the area, searching for any sign of the would-be abductor. A tall, clean-cut officer, Grant, knelt in front of Sophie, offering a reassuring smile. "You were very brave, sweetheart. Can you tell me what the man looked like?" Sophie hesitated, fingers twisting into her mother's shirt. "He had a hat," she whispered. Grant nodded. "That's very helpful. Thank you, Sophie." He turned to Emily. "And the dog? Was it yours?" Emily shook her head. "No, I've never seen him before. He looked like a stray." Another officer, a younger woman named Mitchell, frowned as she jotted notes. "Strange behavior for a stray. Most wouldn't get involved like that." Emily's gaze flickered toward the street, searching for any sign of the dog. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I know it sounds crazy, but it was like he knew Sophie was in danger. He went straight for that man. No hesitation." Grant's expression darkened. "We'll look into it. In the meantime, we'll increase patrols in your area. If you see anyone suspicious, call us immediately." Emily nodded, thanked them, and carried Sophie inside. Her hands trembled as she locked the door behind her, her breath uneven. If that dog hadn't been there, a small bark outside made her jump. Heart pounding, she rushed to the window, peeling back the curtain. And there he was, sitting at the edge of her lawn, bathed in the dim glow of the streetlights. His fur was matted, his ribs faintly visible beneath his thin coat, but his posture was steady, his eyes sharp. He was watching, guarding. Emily hesitated only a moment before stepping outside. The dog didn't move. He just sat there, his tail still against the grass, as if he had always belonged there. She knelt down a few feet away, her voice barely a breath. "Did you really save my little girl?" The dog tilted his head slightly, considering her. Emily exhaled, slowly reaching out. "I don't know where you came from, but thank you. I owe you everything." For a long moment he didn't move. Then cautiously he inched forward, pressing his cold nose against her palm. It was a silent agreement, a connection made without words. Emily's fingers ran gently through his rough fur. "You need a name, don't you?" A tiny voice interrupted from behind her. "Can we call him Lucky?" Emily turned to see Sophie peeking out from the doorway, wonder still glistening in her wide eyes. A small smile tugged at Emily's lips. "I think that's perfect." From that day on, Lucky became a part of their lives. He never stepped inside the house, but he never left the porch either. He was always there, watching, waiting. The police continued their search for the man, but it was as if he had vanished into thin air. One evening, a week after the attack, Emily was closing the blinds when she noticed Lucky staring intently at something across the street. A man in a hooded sweatshirt stood beneath the streetlight. His hands were buried in his pockets. He wasn't moving, just standing, watching. Emily's blood turned to ice. She grabbed her phone, her fingers fumbling as she dialed the police. But before she could press the call button, Lucky growled. A deep, low warning. His body was tense, his eyes locked onto the shadowy figure, and then, just as suddenly as he had appeared, the man turned and walked away. Emily sat on the porch beside Lucky, her fingers threading through his fur, her voice barely a whisper. "Whoever you are, I think you were meant to find us." Lucky let out a soft huff and rested his head on her lap. Neither of them knew what was coming next. But one thing was certain. Lucky wasn't just a stray, and whatever had brought him into their lives, he wasn't finished yet. Emily exhaled, running a hand through her hair. "I guess that makes it official. You're ours now, huh?" Lucky didn't respond, not in the way a normal dog might. No excited wagging, no eager licks. Instead, he simply leaned forward and took a slow bite of food, a quiet acceptance, a silent understanding. Emily smiled, but the moment was short-lived. A noise, a rustling from across the street, made her stiffen. She turned sharply, her pulse quickening. The neighborhood was still, most houses dark as families settled in for the night. But she knew what she had heard. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the trees. Lucky sensed it, too. His ears pricked forward, his body going rigid, a low growl rumbling from deep in his chest. Emily's breath caught. Her mind raced back to the man, the one who had tried to take Sophie. Was he out there now, watching, waiting for another chance? The shadows between the houses looked deeper than usual, stretching unnaturally beneath the dim glow of the streetlights. She swallowed hard. Paranoia. That's what she wanted to believe, but Lucky wasn't paranoid. Lucky knew. "Come inside," she whispered, standing up. "Just for tonight." Lucky didn't move. He remained exactly where he was, eyes locked onto the darkness beyond the street. He wasn't afraid. He was ready. Emily hesitated, her instincts warring against logic. Then finally she backed toward the door. "Be careful," she murmured before slipping inside and locking the deadbolt with trembling fingers. Sleep was impossible. She lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, listening for anything, everything. Every creak of the house made her flinch. Every shift of the wind sent a spike of anxiety through her chest. At some point, exhaustion won. She drifted into restless, fractured dreams. Morning came too soon. The first thing Emily did was rush to the window, heart hammering in her chest. Lucky was still there, exactly where she had left him. His fur was damp with morning dew, his body tense, his eyes scanning the street. Emily's stomach twisted. Nothing looked unusual, just the same empty road, the same quiet houses. But that didn't matter. She could feel it. Someone had been there. Sophie toddled outside in her pajamas, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Good morning, Lucky," she chirped, dropping beside him and wrapping her tiny arms around his neck. Lucky let out a soft huff, finally relaxing beneath her touch. Emily knelt beside them, pressing a kiss to her daughter's forehead. "Let's get you some breakfast, baby." Sophie grinned. "Can Lucky have pancakes?" Emily chuckled, ruffling her daughter's hair. "I think he'd prefer something else." As she led Sophie inside, she glanced over her shoulder once more. The uneasy feeling hadn't left her. If anything, it had settled deeper into her chest. She needed answers. That afternoon, after dropping Sophie off at daycare, Emily drove into town. The animal shelter was a small, aging building with a faded sign above the entrance. A bell jingled as she stepped inside, the sharp scent of disinfectant and dog food filling the air. A woman in her 40s, with short salt and pepper hair, greeted her with a warm smile. "Can I help you?" Emily nodded. "I have a question about a stray dog. He showed up near my house about a week ago." The woman's expression softened. "We see a lot of strays around here. Do you have a picture?" Emily pulled out her phone and showed her a photo of Lucky from that morning. The woman frowned, her brow furrowing as she examined the image. "That's interesting," she murmured. "We've had reports of a dog matching this description around town, but no one's ever caught him." Emily's stomach tightened. "Reports?" The woman nodded. "He's been seen near schools, playgrounds, grocery stores, always watching, never aggressive, never causing trouble, just watching." A shiver ran down Emily's spine. "That's odd." The woman sighed. "Strays like him don't usually survive long on their own, but somehow he has. It's like he knows where to be." Emily swallowed hard. "Do you think he belonged to someone before?" The woman shook her head. "No lost dog reports match him. If he had a home, it was a long time ago." Emily left the shelter with more questions than answers. Lucky wasn't just a stray. He had been waiting for something. For them. That night, Emily sat on the porch with Lucky, staring out into the darkened street. He was silent. His dark eyes scanned the distance, alert, calculating. Emily reached out and rested a hand on his head. "I don't know who you are," she whispered, "but I'm glad you're here." Lucky let out a slow breath, his body finally relaxing beneath her touch. Whatever had brought him to them, whatever he had been waiting for. One thing was certain. He wasn't leaving any time soon. The night air was still, almost unnervingly quiet. Emily wrapped her arms around herself, listening to the soft hum of the streetlights. It wasn't a peaceful quiet. It was the kind of quiet that warned of something waiting just beneath the surface. Lucky sat beside her, his posture tense, his gaze locked onto the same spot across the street where Emily had seen movement the night before. Her stomach twisted. She had spent the entire day trying to push away the unease, doing laundry, baking cookies, anything to distract herself. But it hadn't worked. That feeling wouldn't let go. Emily ran a hand down Lucky's back. "Do you know something I don't?" He didn't move, didn't react. He was focused, watching, waiting. Emily exhaled and stood. "Come on, boy. Let's go inside." She expected him to resist. After a long moment, he followed, but he didn't settle by the door like he usually did. Instead, he paced the living room, glancing out the window every few minutes. Emily tried to ignore it, but after an hour, her nerves were shot. Enough. She grabbed her jacket. "Let's check it out." Lucky's ears perked. His tail twitched slightly. Not excitement. Relief. Emily grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside, Lucky close at her side. The street was empty, but that uneasy feeling coiled tighter in her gut. She aimed the flashlight toward the area Lucky had been staring at. Nothing. She swallowed hard. "Let's take a walk." Lucky led the way, his step silent, purposeful. He wasn't sniffing around. He was following something. Emily's pulse pounded as they moved past the neighboring houses, past the little playground at the end of the block. Then Lucky stopped. Emily tightened her grip on the flashlight. They were standing in front of an old, abandoned house. The windows were covered in grime. The paint was peeling from the walls. It had been empty for years. The kind of place kids dared each other to enter on Halloween. Lucky growled, low. "Dangerous." Emily hesitated. "Is someone in there?" Lucky didn't respond. He didn't have to. His body had stiffened. His breath was slow, controlled. Emily knew she should turn back, call the police, but deep in her gut, she knew the truth. She needed to see for herself. Swallowing down her fear, she crept forward, the flashlight beam shaking slightly in her hands. Lucky moved with her, his growls quieter now, but never stopping. Emily's breath hitched as she saw the door. It was open, slightly. Someone had been here recently. Emily took another step closer, then another. A floorboard inside groaned under unseen weight. She froze. Her breath hitched as fear gripped her chest like a vice. Her mind screamed at her to run, now get away. But her feet were cemented in place. Beside her, Lucky tensed, his growl rising to a deep, guttural warning. His muscles coiled, his ears pinned forward, every fiber of his body screaming danger. Then, just as suddenly as the noise had come, silence. The kind that made her stomach twist. Emily forced herself to breathe. It's nothing. Maybe the house is just settling. But she didn't believe that. Not for a second. She took one last look at the cracked door, its darkness gaping like an open mouth, then turned sharply on her heel. "Let's go." She walked fast, careful not to break into a run. Her pulse hammered in her ears, her every nerve on edge. Lucky stayed tight to her side, his eyes never leaving the house. He didn't relax, not even when they reached their driveway. Emily locked the door behind them and sagged against it, her entire body shaking. Someone had been there, watching, waiting, and Lucky had known all along. By morning, Emily had made her decision. She grabbed her phone and called Detective Grant. As soon as he answered, she launched into everything that had happened. The door, the footsteps, the feeling of something lurking inside that house. He listened carefully before responding. You were right to call. We've had reports of strange activity there the last few weeks, but so far we haven't caught anyone inside. Emily's fingers tightened around the phone. Do you think it's him? A pause. We don't know yet, but we'll send a unit out to check it again. She hung up, but the tight ball of anxiety in her stomach didn't loosen. It only got worse. Lucky sat by the window, unmoving, his sharp gaze locked onto the street. He hadn't touched his food that morning. He was too focused. Emily swallowed hard. This wasn't over. If anything, it was just beginning. Emily tried to go about her day, keeping up the illusion of normalcy. She dropped Sophie off at daycare, checking her rearview mirror twice as she pulled away. She drove home, feeling Lucky's presence beside her, his watchful stare never wavering. Even as the sun climbed higher, the tension in her chest refused to fade. The police had promised to check the abandoned house. But Emily couldn't just sit and wait. She paced the kitchen, her untouched coffee growing cold on the counter. Her mind replayed the past week in a looping nightmare. The attempted kidnapping, Lucky's sudden arrival, the shadowy figure in the street, the house with the open door. She grabbed her phone, scrolling through the neighborhood's online forum, searching for anything that might explain what was happening. Most of the posts were ordinary: furniture for sale, plumber recommendations, lost pets, until one caught her eye: suspicious activity near Birchwood Park. Emily's heart pounded as she clicked on it. A woman named Linda had posted 2 nights ago. Anyone else seeing weird people hanging around the old Birchwood house? Thought I saw someone in the window while walking my dog, but when I looked back, they were gone. Creepy. Emily scanned the replies. Some neighbors dismissed it as paranoia, but others had seen something too. Movement in the windows, a car idling late night, a tall man in a dark hoodie walking toward the house, then vanishing. Emily's stomach twisted. Her fingers flew across the screen as she typed. Does anyone have a picture of the car or the man? I think I saw something too. She hit send and ran a shaky hand through her hair. She needed proof. She needed something concrete to give the police. A low chuff from across the room made her look up. Lucky was watching her, his dark eyes unblinking. She exhaled. I know. We have to be careful. Her phone buzzed. A new reply. I got a blurry picture of the car. Old white sedan. Couldn't see the plates, though. Emily's breath caught as she clicked the image. There it was, parked near the abandoned house, its headlights off. The quality was bad, grainy and dark, but something about the car sent a jolt of recognition through her. Had she seen it before? A nagging thought stirred at the back of her mind. Then another reply. Saw a guy get out. He had a limp. Kept looking over his shoulder. Emily's chest tightened. A limp. That was something. Her hands fumbled for her phone as she dialed Detective Grant's number. He answered immediately. Emily? Did something happen? She took a shaky breath. I think I have more information. People on the forum have seen someone near the abandoned house. There's even a picture of a car. She hesitated. One person said the man had a limp. Silence. Then Grant spoke, his tone different this time. That's new. We hadn't heard about a limp before. Can you send me everything you have? I will, but Grant, be careful when you check that house. I have a bad feeling about this. We will. A brief pause, then softer. Emily, keep your doors locked. If anything feels off, call us immediately. She nodded, even though he couldn't see her. I will. Emily sent the screenshots, but the nervous energy in her body refused to settle. She needed to do something, anything. She cleaned. She folded laundry. But no matter how hard she tried, her mind wouldn't stop replaying the image of that white sedan. By the time she picked Sophie up from daycare, her protective instincts were on high alert. Sophie was as cheerful as ever, chatting about her drawings and how she wanted to give one to Lucky. Emily forced a smile, nodding, trying to keep her worry hidden. But when they pulled into the driveway, her breath caught. Lucky stood at attention on the porch, his ears pricked forward, watching, waiting. Emily scooped Sophie into her arms and carried her inside, double-locking the door behind them. Lucky took his usual spot by the front window, his eyes never leaving the street. That night, Emily barely slept. Every rustling leaf, every distant car engine, every shift of the wind sent a fresh wave of fear through her. She checked on Sophie twice, tucking the blankets around her snugly. Finally, exhaustion pulled at her. But then, a growl? Low, urgent. Emily sat up instantly, her heart pounding. Lucky was at the door, his body tense, his ears pinned forward. Emily swallowed hard and tiptoed to the window, her fingers trembling as she peeled back the curtain just enough to see outside. A figure stood on the sidewalk, motionless, watching. Emily's breath caught. The streetlight barely illuminated him, but she could make out the shape of a man, tall, wearing dark clothing. Her fingers fumbled for her phone. She pressed Grant's number and whispered, "He's here. There's someone outside my house." Grant's voice sharpened. "Stay inside. Lock everything. I'm sending a unit now." Emily clutched the phone tighter, stepping back. Lucky's growl deepened, his body coiled. "Ready!" Minutes passed. The man didn't move. Then, suddenly, headlights appeared down the street. The police. And just like that, the figure turned, not ran, walked. Emily's heart pounded as she watched him disappear behind the houses. One thing was clear, he wasn't done yet. Emily gripped her coffee mug, her fingers wrapped tightly around the ceramic as if it could somehow steady the trembling inside her. Her phone lay beside her on the table, silent. Too silent. She had expected some kind of update from Detective Grant about the white sedan, something, anything. But there was nothing, and the absence of news made her even more anxious. Across the room, Lucky finally stirred. He had barely left his spot by the door all night. Now he stretched, then padded over to Sophie, who immediately beamed and reached up to scratch behind his ears. He let out a quiet huff, pressing his nose to her cheek before settling beside her. Emily sighed. "I wish I knew what you were thinking, boy." She spent most of the day on edge, stealing glances out the window every few minutes, expecting to see him standing there again. But the street remained empty. No sign of the car, no sign of anyone watching. Still, the tension in her chest refused to loosen. By late afternoon, she knew she couldn't take it any more. She had to do something before the fear swallowed her whole. She bundled Sophie into her coat and grabbed Lucky's leash. "Let's go for a walk," she announced, forcing a smile. "Just around the block." Sophie clapped her hands. "Can't we go to the playground?" Emily hesitated. Lucky's ears twitched slightly, but he didn't seem tense. Maybe a little bit of normalcy would help, if only to ease her own mind. She nodded. "All right, but we won't stay long." The playground was usually bustling with kids on a Saturday, but today it was eerily quiet. Only a few parents sat on benches, their children playing idly on the swings and slides. Emily settled onto a bench near the entrance, watching as Sophie climbed the jungle gym, her laughter a rare, fragile sound in the cold afternoon air. For a few minutes, Emily allowed herself to breathe. The fresh air felt good. The world felt normal. Then Lucky lifted his head. Emily felt it instantly. The change in his body, his stillness, the way his muscles coiled, ready. Her stomach dropped as she followed his gaze. A figure stood at the far edge of the park. Dark clothes, hood pulled low. Emily's blood turned to ice. She couldn't see his face. She didn't need to. She knew. Lucky's growl was low, deep, vibrating through the air. His leash tightened in Emily's grip, but he didn't lunge. He was waiting, watching. Emily's pulse pounded in her ears. Her fingers fumbled in her pocket, gripping her phone as she hit the call button for Detective Grant. The man didn't move, didn't step forward, didn't run. He just stood there, watching. Lucky growled again, his stance lowering, every muscle in his body taut. Emily forced herself to stay calm, to not react, to not draw attention, but her voice shook as she spoke. "Emily," Grant answered on the second ring. She whispered, "He's here, at the park. He's watching us." Grant's voice sharpened. "Stay where you are. Don't engage. I'm sending officers now." Emily tightened her grip on the leash, her entire body rigid. Lucky was ready to attack if needed. Then the man moved a single step forward. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Lucky let out a sharp, aggressive bark, loud enough to turn the heads of nearby parents. Emily swallowed the panic clawing at her throat and called out to Sophie, "Sweetheart, come here." Sophie hesitated at the top of the jungle gym. "But I'm playing." "Now, Sophie." Her daughter pouted, but slid down the small slide, running toward her mother. Emily scooped her up just as Lucky pulled at the leash, his growl intensifying. The man stopped, turned his head slightly like he was considering something. Then, just as quickly as he had appeared, he stepped back and walked away. Emily didn't breathe until he disappeared around a corner. Lucky didn't relax until the wail of sirens filled the air. Within minutes, 2 police cars pulled up. Officers jumped out, scanning the area. Detective Grant was the last to arrive, his expression hard as he approached Emily. "Where did he go?" She pointed. "Down the street. He just stood there watching us." Grant signaled to the other officers, who immediately moved in the direction she indicated. Then he turned back to her, his jaw tight. "You're sure it was him?" Emily nodded. Lucky knew. He saw him first. Grant exhaled slowly, running a hand over his face. "He's getting bolder." Emily shivered. "He knew I'd see him." Grant didn't speak for a long moment. Then he gestured toward his car. "Let me drive you and Sophie home." Emily hesitated. "What about Lucky?" Grant glanced at the dog, still standing protectively close. He nodded. "He comes too." The ride home was silent. Emily held Sophie close, feeling the weight of everything settle in. This wasn't random. The man had followed them. He had wanted her to see him. As they pulled into her driveway, Grant turned to her. "We're putting a unit outside your house from now on. No more waiting for him to show up. We're going to catch him." Emily nodded. But deep down, she knew Lucky had been right all along. The danger wasn't gone. It was only getting closer. That night, Emily barely spoke as she carried Sophie inside. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a place under siege, a place being hunted. She locked the door behind her and set Sophie down. "Go wash your hands, sweetheart. I'll make you a snack." Sophie, oblivious to the fear in her mother's voice, nodded and ran off toward the bathroom. Emily let out a shaky breath and turned to Lucky. He was still on high alert, his ears twitching at every sound. He had been right every step of the way, sensing danger before she could. Emily crouched beside him, running a hand through his thick fur. "I don't know what I'd do without you, boy." Lucky let out a slow breath, but didn't relax. His eyes stayed locked on the front door, watching, waiting. Outside, the silhouette of the police officer inside the squad car was visible, scanning the street. It should have made her feel safe. It didn't, because the man wasn't lurking in the shadows anymore. He had followed them. He had wanted to be seen, and that terrified her more than anything. Why? What was he waiting for? Emily tightened her grip on Lucky's fur. She needed answers, and she needed them fast. Emily unlocked the door and cracked it open just enough to see Grant's face. Her voice trembled as she asked, "Did you get him?" Grant shook his head, his expression grim. "He was too fast. The officer lost him in the trees. We've set up a perimeter, but I doubt he's sticking around." Emily felt a wave of nausea wash over her. "He was right there, right outside my house." Grant nodded, his jaw tight. "And next time, he might not run." Emily's breath hitched. "Then what do I do? I can't just sit here and wait for him to come back." Grant hesitated, his eyes narrowing as he chose his words carefully. "We have to assume he's escalating. He's getting bolder, getting closer. That means we don't have much time." Emily swallowed hard, her throat dry. Much time for what? Grant's gaze locked onto hers, his expression deadly serious. "For us to catch him before he makes his move." Emily couldn't stop pacing. The weight of everything pressed down on her, suffocating her thoughts, making it impossible to focus. The police had spent hours combing through the woods, but the man had vanished again just like before. He was careful, calculated. Lucky sat near the door, his ears twitching at every sound. He was still on edge, still sensing the presence that had haunted them for days. Emily ran a hand through her hair, frustration and fear colliding inside her. She wasn't sure how much longer she could live like this, constantly waiting, constantly afraid. Grant had left a second officer outside, and for a moment she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the extra police presence would be enough to keep the man at bay. But deep down, she knew better. He was patient. He had waited this long. She sat on a couch, pulling a blanket around her shoulders. Her hands trembled as she reached for her phone. She opened the neighborhood forum again, rereading the old posts about the suspicious activity. Then she scrolled back to her own message, the one asking if anyone knew who he was. No new replies. She sighed, rubbing her eyes. Her exhaustion was catching up to her, but she refused to sleep. Not yet. Not when he was still out there. A notification flashed across her screen, a new message. Her pulse jumped as she clicked on it. It was from an anonymous account. No name, no profile picture, just a message. "I know what he wants." Emily's breath hitched. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She hesitated, then typed back, "Who is he?" The reply came instantly. "He doesn't just watch. He follows. He waits. And when the time is right, he takes." A shiver ran down her spine. She glanced at Lucky, who was still tense, still watching the door, as if he too could feel the danger closing in. Emily forced herself to type, "Why me?" Another instant response. Because of your daughter? Her stomach twisted. Ice spread through her veins. She swallowed hard before typing, "How do you know this? Who are you?" A pause. Then a final message. I was supposed to be next. Emily's vision blurred. She gripped her phone tightly, her breathing shallow. Whoever this was, they weren't just guessing. They knew. Her phone buzzed again. "Get out while you can." Emily shot to her feet, her entire body trembling. She turned to Lucky, who had already risen, his ears pinned forward. He knew something was wrong. She rushed to Sophie's room, her heartbeat thundering in her chest. Her daughter was fast asleep, curled up with her stuffed rabbit, her breathing slow and peaceful. Emily's hand shook as she brushed a strand of hair from Sophie's face. She couldn't stay here, not anymore. She spun around, grabbing the emergency bag she had packed earlier in the week. She stuffed Sophie's favorite blanket inside, then reached for her car keys. Lucky followed her every move, as if he already knew what she was about to do. She didn't have a plan. She just knew she couldn't stay in this house any longer. Emily scooped Sophie into her arms, whispering softly to her as the little girl stirred. "Shh, baby, we're going on a little trip." Sophie mumbled something incoherent, resting her head on her mother's shoulder. Emily carried her to the door and reached for the handle. Lucky growled, a deep, guttural sound full of warning. Emily froze. Then a noise outside, a slow, deliberate step on the porch. Her breath caught in her throat. Her grip on Sophie tightened. Lucky bared his teeth, his growl intensifying. His body was stiff, every muscle coiled, ready to spring. Another step. Emily's mind screamed at her to move, to run, but she was frozen in place. Her fingers trembled against the doorknob. The police were right outside. If she screamed, if she pounded on the door, they'd hear. Then the doorknob rattled. Emily gasped, stepping back. Lucky lunged forward, barking furiously. The rattling stopped. A beat of silence stretched between them, then footsteps moving away. Emily stumbled backward, her breath coming in sharp gasps. She clutched Sophie close, her heart slamming against her ribs. Lucky kept barking, his body pressed against the door as if daring the intruder to try again. A knock on the window nearly made Emily scream. She turned, her stomach twisting. It was the officer outside, flashlight in hand, peering through the glass. His other hand was already on his radio. Emily rushed to the door, yanking it open. "He was here," she gasped. "He tried to get in." The officer scanned the porch with his flashlight, his other hand hovering over his holstered weapon. He stepped forward cautiously, checking the bushes, the driveway. But the street was empty. Emily's pulse raced as Grant's patrol car screeched to a stop in front of the house. He jumped out, his face set in a deep frown. "What happened?" Emily swallowed hard. "He was on the porch. He tried the door. Lucky scared him off." Grant's face darkened. "He's getting desperate." Emily clutched Sophie closer. "We can't stay here." Grant met her gaze, then nodded. "Pack what you need. You're coming with me." Emily didn't hesitate. She grabbed her bag and slipped Sophie's shoes on, all while Lucky stayed pressed against her leg, still on high alert. Grant stayed by the door, watching the street like a hawk as she moved quickly. Minutes later, Emily was in Grant's patrol car, Sophie still half asleep in her lap, Lucky lying at her feet. As the car pulled away from the house, she exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. She didn't know where they were going. She didn't know what would happen next. But for the first time in days, she wasn't waiting for him to make his move. She was making hers. Emily kept her arms wrapped tightly around Sophie as the patrol car sped through the darkened streets. She didn't ask where they were going. She didn't care, as long as they were far away from that house. From him, it didn't matter. Lucky lay at her feet, his head resting on her leg, but his body remained tense, alert. Emily could feel the heat of his breath against her skin. He wasn't resting. He was waiting, just like she was. Grant kept his eyes on the road, one hand gripping the wheel tightly while the other rested near his radio. "We're taking you to a safe house," he finally said, breaking the silence. "It's an off-the-books location. No one outside the department knows about it." Emily nodded, but her pulse wouldn't slow. "For how long? Until we catch him?" She swallowed hard. "And if you don't?" Grant's grip on the wheel tightened. "We will." Emily forced herself to look out the window. The city lights blurred past them, fading as they moved farther away from the town center. They were heading toward the outskirts now, toward a place unfamiliar, a place she hoped he wouldn't find. The drive stretched on in silence. Sophie had fallen back asleep against Emily's chest, her tiny hand gripping the collar of her mother's shirt. Emily smoothed her daughter's hair absent-mindedly, whispering a silent promise that she wouldn't let anything happen to her. Lucky let out a soft huff, shifting slightly, but he still didn't relax. Emily glanced down at him, pressing her hand against his fur. "It's okay, boy. We're safe now." But even as she said it, she wasn't sure she believed it.